I'm Dr. Dave Jando. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is a very dear friend, Bill Holter. Now, I woke up yesterday morning and I said to myself, you know what? Based on what I'm hearing by my sources behind the curtain, this is coming to an abrupt turning point. And not a good turning point as it relates to the financial scene. And the first person I thought of in contacting about giving people I don't know, whatever you want to call it, final warning, was Bill Holter. Bill has been on the front line of providing you information the bought-off, lamestream, fake media tentacle of the deep state does not want you to know about. For those of you not familiar with Bill, he retired in 2006 and moved his family out of the United States because he saw a problem on the financial horizon. That problem arose in 2007, 8, and 9. Bill returned back to the United States in 2011 and made his home in the great state of Texas. He then joined Miles Franklin, milesfranklin.com, as an associate writer in 2012, posted commentaries there. And Bill is a precious metals broker at Miles Franklin at this point. You can reach Bill through his website, billholter.com. The bottom line is Bill Holter is one of the most outstanding forensic economic analysts in the world, and that is why I have Bill with us today, and Bill can tell me right off the bat if I'm blowing this out of proportion, but I believe the financial abrupt takedown, if you will, is at hand. It's my honor to welcome back Bill Holter. Bill, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Okay, Bill. When I woke up yesterday morning and contacted and said, hey, Bill, I need you on, and here's why. Bill, am I off on my assessment?
No, I think things are definitely coming to a head, and really all you need to do is look at two things. You can look at money supply has been declining now for 12 to 18 months. That's never happened before other than during the Great Depression. The other thing is you've got the 10-year Treasury pushing 5%. So you've had to move from 0.0 or from 0.6% to 5%. I mean, a huge move would be going from 5 to 10, or a lesser percentage move would be 10 to 15. But because we're coming off the zero-bound range, and we were there for so many years, so many deals were done with a 1%, 2%, 3% interest assumption. Now you're looking at, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, home mortgages are 8%. And the entire financial system runs on credit, as well as, and most people don't realize this, as well as the real economy runs on credit. And I've said for years and years, once credit seizes up, it's completely game over. It's game over in the financial markets, and it's game over in the real economy. And when we see this seizure in credit, and I think we're right on the doorstep of it, I think the best way to describe what's going to happen is there's going to be a global hurricane. And you know what happens when a hurricane is going to hit the East Coast or the Gulf Coast or whatever? Grocery stores, they're picked clean. I mean, they have 3 days worth of goods, and that's it. The problem with a credit seizure is new goods are not going to arrive. So I think those are the two things you look at. Is liquidity is very tight, on top of whatever it is, whether it's a business or a property or what have you. You're not able to, the credit standards, banks have tightened. So it's more difficult to get credit. And then if you can get credit, can you actually afford the interest rate? I mean, look at the hotels in San Francisco. Those things are going under left and right because the occupancy is down. And even if the occupancy stayed the same, with these higher interest rates, they can't roll their notes over. So, I mean, it is the biggest debt bubble in all of history being burst by higher interest rates.
Bill, on this past week's radio show, and actually several presentations and videos before that, I outlined the fact that the timing of the financial system, if you will, falling in its own footprints, has been actually, this is not coincidence, this is not incompetence, this is not an accident. This is all, in fact, planned. And where the criticism came, Bill, was when I said, look, the timing of the situation in the Middle East and the escalation of war is not incompetence, not an accident, not a coincidence. It's in fact timed along with the financial events, because when the financial system comes down, the people that are essentially the perpetrators of the implosion of the system, that being the banksters of the world, they want people to point at, oh, the financial system is on fire because of the problems in the Middle East, as opposed to an event not occurring and people going, wait a minute, why is the financial system, and pointing the finger at the banksters. Bill, I got a lot of criticism for that. Was that criticism accurate against what I had presented, or do you think the flip side of that, what I had presented, is actually the more accurate scenario?
No, you were absolutely correct. And I have been saying for, 6 years, 7 years, that once the financial system was at the point where there's no holding it up any longer, or when they wanted to pull the plug, they were going to have some type of event to point the finger at and be able to say our financial plans were working well, except for XYZ event. And I mean, obviously what's going on in the Middle East could be, a huge event. And that's, they will ultimately, whether it's the Middle East or something else, they will find some event that they can point at so that they don't take the blame for basically looting the system, because that's what's been done.
So, Bill, sequence this out for us. Over the ensuing, for all I know, week, let alone weeks or months. Bill, sequence this out for us on how this comes down, this financial system.
Well, it's my opinion that it will be it'll be a 72-hour event. There's going to be some type of event, some type of bankruptcy. Who knows? There will be some type of event that starts a cascade of defaults. Those defaults will snowball. They will snowball into derivatives, and we know derivatives are over a $2 quadrillion market. I mean, the derivatives dwarf the assets on the planet. And I think it will take 72 hours, 3 turns of the globe, and at that point, no markets. What will happen is during that 72 hours, there will be market after market after market that's not able to open. And I think by the time 3 days is done, there will be no markets open. There will be there won't be any trading. There won't be any way for you to change, if you're long stocks or what have you, or you want to buy gold and silver, you're not going to be able to do that after the 72 hours. It's just my opinion that it will take 3 days, and fewer markets will open until the third day. Nothing will open. And that 72-hour number is also interesting with the human body. When I'm talking about the human body, I'm talking about people's stomachs. If somebody doesn't eat for 3 days, that's the breaking. That's where people lose their mind. And I mean, believe it or not, there are a lot of people that don't even have 3 days worth of food stocked up. They're used to going to the grocery store every day, getting fast food, whatever. So I think, along with the financial system, you're also going to have a populace that's incredibly angry. Not just because they've lost their capital or have no way to get their capital and no way to spend their capital, and empty stomach at the same time.
You know, Bill, I had interesting you bring that up. I had a discussion the other day with some folks that are experts in what's called food security. Now, food security is not about making sure the food isn't tainted with salmonella or something. It's they focus on the distribution of food in areas, rural areas, urban areas. Here's an interesting thing that was pointed out to me, is that they pointed out that a significant number of people in urban environments actually go to the grocery store every day. The reason being they don't have adequate refrigeration capabilities, which is why they go every day. So when you say people don't have 3 days worth of food, people go, oh, let me go to my pantry. Well, that's fine. You can go to your pantry. But there are millions of people in the United States that don't just have a pantry. They don't have a refrigerator.
Right.
So
yeah, and on top of that, you've got to add in the credit when you're talking about distribution of food. Right. Food's not gonna it's not gonna get from the farm to the processor to the grocery store without credit.
So, Bill, I one of the things I do is it's almost like putting a needle in my eye. I watch the bought-off lamestream fake media to hear what they're saying. And this morning, I had been watching Fox Business News. And the analyst was saying, well, you know, we got to watch things here a little bit because, well, if we don't watch ourselves, we could, in our country, essentially be bankrupt, become bankrupt. Oh, wait, become bankrupt. And I'm like, dude, we're already bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this bankruptcy, when it becomes, if you will, common knowledge, will only, if you will, exacerbate the underlying credit issues that you've been speaking about for years.
Right. I mean, mathematically, the U.S. is a bankrupt. I mean, go back 30 years ago, the definition of a banana republic is twofold. One, the rule of law, which, I mean, that's pretty clear here in the United States. The rule of law is gone. And when any country got to 100% of GDP, well, the U.S. now is 130% of GDP. And the problem is the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So basically you have a bankrupt entity issuing the world's reserve currency. And to make matters worse, I mean, there are plenty areas in the world that are worse than the United States. The total debt to GDP globally is over 300%.
It's not sustainable. In fact, Ron Paul recently said the following. It actually sounded like Bill Holter. He did. Federal spending is so out of control that it only took 3 months for the federal debt to increase by $1 trillion with a T, $1 trillion to over $33 trillion. In contrast, it took almost 200 years for the federal debt to reach $1 trillion with a T dollars. So the federal government racked up more debt in the last 3 months in 2023 than it did from the time of the ratification of the Constitution in 1789 until Ronald Reagan's first term. He went on, there will be even more shocking increases in the future since, according to some experts, federal debt is increasing by approximately $14 billion with a B, $14 billion a day.
Right.
Bill, that's not commensurate with a stable financial system.
No, not at all. I mean, that's like Wimpy and Popeye. I'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Right.
I mean, that's really what has happened. I think it's important to understand that, you know, they give us numbers, the GDP is growing at 2% or 3% or whatever. It's important to understand that those GDP numbers include the government spending. So, I mean, if we're spending $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion a year over and above what the tax receipts are, it's basically made up growth, if you will. If we did not have the 33 trillion in deficits, that's 33 trillion that would have been taken away from GDP over the years. I mean, what is $1 trillion based on a 25 trillion dollar economy? It's 4%.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time we grew 4%? Been, quite a while, on a stable basis. So what I'm getting at is, without that trillion, if they're telling you we're growing at 2%, we actually had organic growth, or I should say organic shrinkage of 2%, because you got to take that 4% out to get to actual organic either growth or decline.
So people that look at the debt say, well, the way we're going to get out of this debt situation, these 33 trillion, which is, right, as you've always pointed out, a tip of the iceberg, because when you add the unfunded liability mandates into it, you're over 100 trillion, right? People say,
200.
well, 200. Okay. So people say, well, the way we're going to get out of this, Bill, is we're going to grow our way, and that way, that's how we'll pay off the debt. Bill, that's impossible, isn't it?
That was the theory during Ronald Reagan's term.
Yeah.
Is that, and I mean, it was the theory. Who was it? Dick Cheney during the Bush administration. Mm-hmm. Deficits don't matter. Mm-hmm. Well, they do matter. You can't grow once you get to a certain point. Debt is a great thing on the way up, but the problem is you reach debt saturation, mm-hmm. and then you need more and more debt to create. It used to be, 20 cents worth of debt would create $1 of GDP, mm-hmm. and then it got to the point where $1 worth of debt created only $1 of GDP. Now it's like $4 or $5, or probably higher now. But $5 of debt creates only $1 of GDP, and that's how we got to 33 trillion.
And the other two ways out of this, Bill, and again, this actually adds up to the buildings falling themselves, is either default on the debt where we go, see ya, or right. We depreciate the dollar by printing so much funny money to pay off the debt, if you will, in funny money dollars, which is another way of saying the towers fall into their own footprint financially.
Right. Those are the only two avenues, either outright default or you debase the currency. And debasing the currency, you're talking about 50%, 100% inflation rates and commensurate interest rates. Now, what's that going to do? I mean, if we had 20% or 40% or 50% interest rates, would any business project in the United States be profitable that needed debt to function? There would be nothing at all that would be profitable.
No. Well, and in fact, Bill, again, tell me if I'm off, we see China dumping its U.S.-denominated debt. We see other countries dumping their U.S. because they see the writing on the wall, and people are saying, oh, that's not a big deal. Oh, and the other thing that's not a big deal are these BRICS countries creating their own trading currency that they think will be a reserve currency. And, okay, they're backed by gold, silver, oil, natural gas, natural resources, whatever, but no, King Dollar. Let's channel Larry Kudlow. King Dollar will always be there. Bill, these people, I do believe these BRICS countries, of which I think 41 now are lining up to become other countries, become members of BRICS, see the writing on the wall and they're saying, we want door 2. Door 1 being the dollar. Right. Is that a false assessment on my part?
No, that's correct. And they're doing this because they know. Yeah. They know for a fact the dollar is going to collapse. And what they're doing is they're getting out of the way. Yeah. They want free and fair and honest trade. So they're going to trade amongst themselves, and they're tired of Uncle Sam's boot on their neck with the SWIFT system, with dollars, and that's what you're seeing is that the BRICS, and you just saw what was it? China.
Mm-hmm.
China just did a deal. I forget who it was with, but they did it in digital yuan, and that 5 years ago those would have been dollars. So the demand for the dollar is falling at the same time that the credibility, if you will, the financial solvency of the U.S. government that issues the dollar is being questioned.
So many people have accused me when I speak about the global financial reset, is that being conspiracy theory? It might be conspiracy, but it's conspiracy reality, and I'm not sure how much of a conspiracy it is. It's kind of right in your face as far as I'm concerned. But Bill, this was written by Madge Wagi, and I want your take on this. The global reset will happen fast. You won't be warned. You'll either be ready in advance, or you'll be subject to whatever crisis unfolds. Whether it be a collapse of the banks, an economic collapse, a war, or all three is anybody's guess, but it will be the world's largest economic event in history. The global reset will happen fast. You won't be warned by governments, bankers, media, or international corporations. I think she's on target, but people have been warned through people like yourself, right, and what we try to do on our platform and several other platforms try to do in the independent media.
Well, Dave, you could go back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and if you used the term reset, you were basically a crackpot.
Right.
But think about it now. In mainstream media, you're hearing the term reset used many, many times a day, and it's not just mainstream media. I mean, you're seeing high-level government officials using the term reset. Mm-hmm. So, reset is not some crackpot theory. Reset, if you listen to the WEF, if you listen to Klaus Schwab, they flat out say, we are going to reset the world into a new world order. That's the plan of the WEF. I personally believe that the first reset, they're going to try to do this man-made, and they're going to try to do it man-made so that they can continue with power, but that's going to fail. And then there's going to be a Mother Nature reset, and I think that Mother Nature reset is going to be between East and West, where the West has borrowed trillions upon trillions, but what did we do with that money? We basically ate it. We lived off of it in the West. What did the East do? And they borrowed just as much or more, but they built stuff. I mean, look at China. They have airports. They have rail lines. They have entire cities that were built. So they're actually going to have assets, and fairly new assets, new infrastructure for that debt that they're going to default on. And the West, look at the infrastructure in the West. It is definitely decayed and not been maintained over the years. So we've eaten our seed corn, and they've plowed the fields, planted it, and the East is going to reap the harvest.
So, Bill, let's talk about how people protect themselves, okay? I think the case has been dissected and eloquently laid out by yourself that we got some big financial issues at hand that are going to be enormous. So, Bill, educate folks in how the best way they can protect themselves from this, as you described it, hurricane. Right.
Well, first off, you want to get your financial assets out of the system. You want as few or no intermediaries between you and your capital. That's the first thing. And when I'm talking about that, you want to get money out of banks. You want to own gold and silver because this is a bankrupting world, and gold and silver are the only two monies on the planet that can't bankrupt. You want to get, if you have stocks, you want to get the certificates. Uh, I don't know if you've The Great Taking. Have you read that yet?
I have not.
It's an excellent book, and it talks about how basically your assets legally are going to be taken as the banks, the brokers, the insurance companies, and the book claims, and I can see how it could happen, even DRS, direct registration. They're going to take your, and everything was footnoted, so it's not, this is not a guy's opinion.
Right.
He's basically just telling you what the laws are. Mm-hmm. So when this happens, people are going to lose their assets. You need to be in a position where they can't take your assets from you. That's the financial side of it. The personal side of it, you want to become as self-sufficient as you possibly can. And it's funny, just over the last week, I've talked to 3 or 4 people that say, they're doing this, they can purify water, they've got a small generator, blah, 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 but they live in a city.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, my response is, you're dead. You're dead because you don't know who's friend, who's foe, and you don't have any idea what direction it's coming from. And everyone's going to have nothing, and if you have something, they're going to take it. And it's going to be that way out in the country also. But at least you have a fighting chance in a rural community with like-minded people. If there's people in your community that show up that are outsiders, they'll be pushed out. So, I mean, I really believe if you live urban, if you live in a city and you think you're going to make it through this, you're sorely mistaken.
And Bill, what do you say to the people who say, well, yeah, okay, I get where Bill's coming from, but, I'm going to also put a lot of eggs, if not all my eggs, in the basket of having cryptocurrencies?
Well, good luck with that. I mean, we could do a whole show on cryptocurrencies. My opinion is it's digital air. It's nothing. It's a speculation. And in a system down scenario, how good is cryptocurrency going to be? Do you really think a farmer is going to accept or even have the ability to accept a cryptocurrency as opposed to, you hand over one thin 1964 or earlier dime for a dozen eggs? Or you hand over an ounce of silver for 5 pounds of meat or whatever. I personally, I don't believe in cryptocurrencies. I think it's an absolute perfect accounting system, but the accounting system is accounting for digital nothings, digital air.
And the other concern I have, Bill, are the exchanges. The exchanges. Right? I mean, you can only trade on these exchanges, and we've seen what's going on with these exchanges, right? I mean, they're beyond on shaky ground.
You can trade individually, person to person. I mean, that's easily done. So you don't have to go through an exchange. I mean, you can go from your wallet to someone else's wallet. But again, to me, the bottom line is, what is a Bitcoin? What is an Ethereum? What is it? It's digital air. Yeah. I mean, people will say, oh, well, it's stored up energy, stored up technology. In a system down scenario, it's going to be worth zero, in my opinion.
So, Bill, as you look at your crystal ball, was I being, paranoid in calling you up yesterday and say, Bill, we need to do an interview ASAP because I'm concerned that the system's coming down here very quickly and we need to get you out there for, if you will, a red flag hurricane warning ASAP. Was I off on my timing here?
Well, I mean, no one has a crystal ball, but I wrote an article about a week, 10 days ago, basically on the same subject, the same topic. This is it. I mean, a crash is imminent. The whole system coming down, in my opinion, is absolutely imminent. And then you add in what's going on in the Middle East, and that gives them something to point at. Mm-hmm. So no, I think you're spot on. I think it's here. I mean, you could wake up any day and find out, something bad has happened. And like I said, within 72 hours, you're going to have an entirely different world that you wake up to each day than what we've experienced throughout our whole lifetimes.
And Bill, as I mentioned in your intro, and as we've alluded to several times in this interview, you are a sub-specialist, if you will, in precious metals. So give us your, if you will, your 3,000 oversight view of the precious metals situation right now, in particular with gold and silver, demand, supply, looking at where the banks are positioned in their paper contracts and the like. What are you seeing? What's your take?
I can tell you, I mean, the demand was crazy the first full half of the year. With the banks going down. I mean, my phone, I was talking to people on my phone plugged into the wall because I had no charge left. I mean, it was that crazy. And I can tell you over the last 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, up until a week ago, business got quiet, premiums have come down, the availability is there. I mean, if you wanted to pull the trigger and make a decent sized trade, it's doable now at lower premiums than we were earlier in the year. And after the Gaza thing blew up, the phone has started ringing again, not like it did back in March and April, but there does seem to be more interest. So, in my opinion, I don't really understand why business got quiet, because things have just gotten worse and worse if you're looking behind the curtain. But, from a mainstream news or whatever, you've got Wall Street telling you everything's fine, strong economy, inflation's coming down, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the real case, but I think it placated some people into thinking, well, I'll wait before I do something. And I think that's looking back is going to be a huge mistake.
Bill, you were a very close friend, and actually you were a co-producer of the JSMindset.com website with Jim Sinclair. Jim recently passed away. I can't think of a better person to answer this question. When you look at Jim's career and all the advice he gave over all these years, what were some of the most important pearls of wisdom that you believe Jim delivered over the past several decades?
I think the biggest thing that Jim talked about and tried to get people to adhere to was guts. Get out of the system. All the way back to 2003 or 4, he was telling people, get your certificates. If you have a brokerage account and you're not going to trade that stock and you're going to hold on to it, get your certificate issued out to you, because if your broker goes out of business, you're going to be tied up for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and not have access to your capital. If it turns out that, and I do believe that the book is correct, The Great Taking, if that turns out to be correct, you're going to legally lose your.
So obviously, Bill, we just got cut off. The powers that be, I guess, didn't like what you were saying as it relates to Jim Sinclair's most salient points that he made over a number of decades' time. You were talking about, and I guess they didn't like this, get out of the system, right? You were talking about that. So, Bill, let's try that one again.
Yeah, actually, we've talked about that for years and years. Actually, I think what's happening is it's getting cloudy. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm on a dish, so that could have affected the signal. Anyway, Jim advocated getting out of the system. He said if you had stocks with a broker, get the certificates in hand, because if your broker goes out of business, in normal times it could take you 2, 3, 5 years to get access to your capital again. If it turns out that this book, The Great Taking, is correct, and I do believe it's correct, legally they can take your shares and you have no recourse whatsoever. So I think the most important thing that Jim told people over the years was get out of the system. Have as few intermediaries between you and your money. Meaning, if you have serious money in the bank, put it into gold and silver, store it yourself, hide it, whatever. Get your stock certificates. Don't be fooled into believing, okay, so you have an annuity or some type of monthly income. Don't be fooled into believing that that's going to continue, because it probably won't. Jim was the quintessential trader. He grew up, his father was a trader on Wall Street, and Jim took after him, and Jim traded all kinds of different assets. And some of the knowledge that he gave out for free to people, you sell the spikes, you buy the fishing lines. In other words, and he was talking about gold. You buy the smashes and you sell the spikes. You have a core position that you're not willing to get rid of, but you trade around that core position. And he was obviously not perfect. No one was perfect, but he was very, very good at trading. He made the prediction in, I think it was like 1973 or 74. The gold was going to trade up to $875, $900 an ounce. And at one point in 1979, he had the largest COMEX gold contract position in the world. And it took him a little over 1 day to liquidate the whole thing, but he liquidated pretty much everything over $800 an ounce. And then back in 2003, 2004, he predicted that gold by January 1st, 2011 would be $1,650. Well, it took until July 1st. So he was off by 6 months, 8 years ahead of time. He used French curves. Jim was, as I said, he was just a fabulous trader. He had a sense of all markets. And credit to him, he started writing in 2000, 2001, and gave it out for free. He was, if you want to call it, a humanitarian from the standpoint of teaching people.
Bill, educate our listeners in how they can get in touch with you and how they can follow your efforts through your website, billholter.com.
Sure. You can go to billholter.com. There is a contact. There's a contact icon there, or you can contact me through my business email. It's bholter@hotmail.com.
Bill, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. You truly put your life on the line in educating and empowering every person willing to listen, because you provide people information that they might not want to hear, but they need to know. And it's definitely what what I call the globalist cult, or the globalist syndicate, or the New World Order crowd, or the criminal international banking syndicate, or the deep state, or the shadow government. They're all the same. They don't want people to know, because the information you provide protects them. And I thank you, Bill, for your willingness. You speak about Jim Sinclair, who truly gave a tremendous amount to people. Well, you're the same way, Bill. You have modeled your life in that you care about others. I'd like to think that's what we do here with our platform. We provide information so people can get a hold of it to help themselves, and then hopefully help others with that information. And I thank you, Bill. I thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And I thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.